I love the history of college football. I don't remember a time or a year with 3 teams this special. I don't. Am I being hyperbolic here? Or you could make an argument that all 3 of these teams, LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson, are number 1. Do you think it's kind of a strange year in terms of this much dominance at the top?
It all goes down to health of team. I would have put Alabama in there if they would have had Tua, and they lost that great middle linebacker early in the year. So the fact that Ohio State, Clemson, and LSU have stayed relatively healthy, that's the bottom line. But I agree with you. I think those are elite teams. I've already watched film on Clemson, and the thing that LSU has, Colin, is they have a better resume. They play these elite teams. Ohio State has some big wins against Wisconsin and Penn State and team up north. However, the elite, LSU's have the best. They've been in the street fights already. Clemson, quite honestly, haven't played great teams. And so it's going to be an intriguing matchup.
Joe Burrow. He came to Ohio State. You just happened to have a quarterback who was there. So Joe Burrow goes to Ohio State, then transfers to LSU. You obviously, the kid, the family. His elevation this year is, frankly, to a lot of people, shocking. Are you at all shocked by how good he is?
I don't want to say shocked. I'm just awful happy for him because we had him as a freshman. He was not a highly recruited player coming out of Athens, Ohio. Tom Herman saw something in him, and I remember he called me from the practice field and said, I got your next Alex Smith right here. He's unbelievable. He's a little bit under the radar. And so we took him, and he got in a room with a guy named J.T. Barrett, and who's the ultimate worker, and they just would work every day. And then he had a terrible thing happen. He was our backup quarterback going into, I believe it was 17, and he broke his hand, non-contact injury, right before the first game. Dwayne Haskin then steps in. The rest is history. Dwayne goes on to help us beat the team up north and then wins the job by a slight margin. It was heartbreaking when Joe left because we all love Joe.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about him, his personality, because when I watch him, I see a big kid that's athletic. He's got a good arm. We're going to be watching him against Oklahoma and maybe in the national championship game. What do we know about his personality? Because he's going to win the Heisman, I'm told, as well.
Yeah, he won the Heisman. I don't know what's going to happen, but his performance against Georgia, it's over, as far as I'm concerned. And really, everybody I've talked to, he's got a great mom and dad. They are so into Joe, and their family is extremely close, a real football background. His father's a longtime defensive coordinator for Frank Solich at Ohio U. I love the family. They're incredible. Joe's a quirky guy that is very confident. As a great teammate and is tough on a scale 1 to 10. His toughness is a 10. His leadership's a 10. And I think he's a hard one to beat. He'll be very hard. And I think you got to give credit to that coaching staff, too, now. I've coached against LSU for many years. This is a new era of LSU football, the offense.
Yeah, it's very clever. There's no question about it. It was always a power-running downhill team, and now they can do that, and they've added the vertical element and the passing element. Let's go to Ohio State and Clemson. Listen, it's a coin flip game to me, although Clemson came in as a slight favorite. Now, here's the knock. The knock is, and I think it's fair, I think the SEC is the best conference. I think the Big Ten's second. I think it's a fair criticism to say, man, Clemson is winning by 40. They are not at all challenged. Is that a drawback to you? Because Ohio State's been in some fistfights with Wisconsin. These are real games. Clemson is in blowouts at half, Urban. Would that be a little bit of a disadvantage and an advantage for the Buckeyes?
I think it is. I think, Ohio State fell behind by 14 points at halftime to Wisconsin. And Jonathan Taylor, a great running back, was having a day, ran for 150 yards. And Coach Day and Justin Field have never been in that situation. And to come back and fight, make the halftime adjustments, that's a sign of a good staff, a good coach, and a great leader. So I think that gives them an advantage. The ACC is not good. The ACC is really struggling. When your Miamis and Florida States and Louisvilles aren't top 15 teams like they have in the past, and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's a team that, those are those are historically extremely strong programs. So ACC, when those teams are great, the ACC is great, but they're not.
Yeah. I want to talk about Ryan Day, who is your successor. Now, the criticism is, he's using Urban Meyer's guys. Urban's one of the great coaches. It's a stacked deck full of talent. But what did you see? Because you still work at the university. Tell me, Urban, what you saw with him, knowing you were comfortable promoting him and really going to Gene Smith and saying, this is the guy. Like, you got it right. Like, what were the moments that you knew Ryan Day was special?
Well, Ryan Day was a graduate assistant for me at Florida years ago, 2005. And Bob Stoops, when he found Lincoln Riley, that's really every head coach's dream, is to all these great support staff people that work their tails off. And when you make a coaching change and they all are uprooted, I'm very biased, I think we have the best infrastructure in college football, and that's academically, athletically, training staff, weight staff. The whole thing's, our recruiting staff's elite. And Ryan Day, he would have been a head coach last year, but I actually went to Gene Smith and our president. I said, I think I found the next head coach at Ohio State. And I actually started thinking about your legacy of a program and I thought Bob Stoops did it great, you're not here forever. I was thinking about going maybe another year or two, but we would have lost Ryan. And when you lose Ryan, then you might bring in someone who's not quite as good, and then the program slips. So it's worked out great. Ryan, I always use the term elite because he is.
I've always had this theory. It's one of my goofy theories that there are glamour jobs and then there are great jobs. And that Miami's a glamour job and USC's a glamour job and Texas is a glamour job. Ohio State and Oklahoma, Alabama, those are great jobs. And, it's funny about this. When I think LSU's a great job, but I think Georgia is more of a glamour job. And I look at college football. I hear your name every 5 minutes comes up for jobs, and I'm like, some of these jobs sound better than they are. Am I a little crazy on this? But I don't think there's as many great jobs as people think, but I think there's a ton of glamour jobs in college football.
I've heard this conversation. It all starts and ends with recruiting. And I think, Miami's been up and down for years. We all remember in the days with the Jimmy Johnson and Dennis Erickson and Butch Davis when they were just NFL players, a little bit like Ohio State is now. All 22 players will play in the NFL. I think it all starts and ends recruiting. I think USC is not a glamour job. I think that's an elite job. Why? Within 2 hours of your campus, you got the best players in America, or as good as any. I think Georgia is not a glamour job. I think Georgia is real. Atlanta, Georgia, and the surrounding suburbs, as good a high school footballers in America. Same, I would consider Ohio State that. I think Miami, Florida State, to a degree, are somewhat glamour just because at times the talent in Florida, it's great, but sometimes it's underdeveloped. And it takes time for those guys to develop. I'm not talking about the private schools and the Lakelands, the great high schools, but there's a lot of schools in Florida, and I experienced it when I was with the Florida Gators, is that they're development players. For whatever reason, the high school coaches aren't paid near as well as the ones in Georgia and Texas. So you get a little bit lesser coaching at some schools. Some schools are fantastic. But that's why I would consider everything about glamour and all that. I agree with, it's interesting how you said that, but I always look at recruiting. Can you go recruit the best of the best? That's where I thought USC and Georgia, I would put them in the other category.
By the way, one more question about Clemson, Ohio State. You said that you've looked at Clemson film already. If I just said to you 2 sentences, when you looked at film as an all-time great coach, what are the 2 things about Clemson that just pop on film?
2 things. Offensively, their wide receivers and tailback and the quarterback's in a groove. So their offensive skill is as good as Ohio State's seen by far. And that includes their tailbacks outstanding. On defense, they're 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. They're odd, bare, and the 4 down. And that is very difficult to prepare for. That Coach Venables does I'm still amazed. I wondered if it would change how we played them before, but they're doing the same stuff. It's very hard to prepare for.
Why is it hard to prepare for their defense?
Well, it's 3 distinctly different styles of defense. Bare defense is a defense in its own self. 4 down is a defense in itself, and then the odd. And for an offensive line, it's confusing, and how much time. So you have 40 minutes to work on offense in practice. What are you going to work on? The good thing is you have bowl time, so you have a little bit of work on it. But they're not quite what they were on the defensive line. They're very good, but you're talking about when we played them before, you had all first-round draft picks. So they're very good, but the scheme's very hard to prepare for.
Good stuff. Urban Meyer, Coach, good seeing you. We'll see you soon.
You're the best.
Thanks,
Colin,
man.
Thanks.
You bet. Urban Meyer. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.